Okay, I'm Ann Knight, and I'm doing the programs for the Dems. So there's three of us here from the league. I also work with the league as their government person, and we have Nancy Marr. She's our voter services person, and then we also have Katie Watkins. She's our programs person. And so we're all doing going to present several of the propositions to you today. And as we do each proposition, we'll take questions before we get to the next one. So it's fresh in mind what your questions are. We'll take questions from the audience here and questions via chat. Okay, and so first up is Nancy Marr, and I will have her also present the League of Women Voters and who we are. Gallery, take it off the talking. We usually give a little talk about the league. I'm sure that you are all familiar with the League of Women Voters, and we are nonpartisan, and we have an education arm and an advocacy arm. And when we do education, we cannot do advocacy. And the same way, if you do advocacy, you can't do education. So today is education. I just wanted to let you know that. And I also wanted to mention that when we do a presentation, we talk about what the supporters and opponents say. And those are from the supporters and the opponents. They are not arguments that the League of Women Voters is presented. It is what they say. And sometimes what they say may not make 100% of sense, but that is what they say anyway. So I'm going to talk about Proposition 1, the Right to Reproductive Freedom Amendment, which is a constitutional amendment referred by the state legislature. To get it on the ballot, it took a 2/3 vote of each house, which is amazing. And but to have it pass, it only takes a majority vote of the people. So the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision of the Supreme Court recognized the woman's right to choose to have an abortion as a protected right in the Constitution. And following that, states have limited ability to restrict abortions. In June 2022, the Supreme Court ruling in the Dobbs case upheld a Mississippi law restricting abortions and overturned the Roe versus Wade and its federal protections. And this left the states with the ability to allow, limit, or ban abortions according to their decisions. Immediately following that decision, in June of 2022, Proposition 1 was introduced as a Senate constitutional amendment and was passed by both houses. So Proposition 1 would amend the California Constitution to establish a right to reproductive freedom, which includes the right to an abortion or to choose or refuse contraceptives. The measure supports specific guarantees in the state constitution to the right of privacy and to equal protection under the law, and states that nothing in this measure narrows or limits these rights. Abortion is legal in California, according to state statute, up to the point of viability, the point at which a fetus can survive outside of the uterus. Abortion is legal after viability only if the patient's life or health were endangered. Otherwise, it is prohibited. Since 1969, state laws and the California Supreme Court rulings have protected a woman's right to choose in California. Medi-Cal, I did want to mention one particular statute. In 2002, the California State Legislature passed the Reproductive Privacy Act, which added language to state statutes declaring that women have a fundamental right to choose to bear a child or to choose and to obtain an abortion. Medi-Cal health care services include both abortion and contraceptives. While Medi-Cal is a shared cost with the federal government, all costs of abortions are paid exclusively by Medi-Cal. So, does this have a fiscal impact? The legislative analyst says no, because the rights to reproductive freedom that the Proposition 1 guarantees are already existing in state law. So Proposition 1 wouldn't really have a fiscal impact. Supporters for Proposition 1 are the California Medical Association, and I'm only reading a few because every one of these measures has a list of supporters and opponents, so we're not going to spend all the time reading them. The California Nurses Association, Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California, and the League of Women Voters of California. Supporters say that Prop 1 will enshrine the fundamental right to an abortion and the fundamental right to contraception in the California state constitution. And also they say this measure keeps reproductive medical decisions where they belong, with individuals and their healthcare providers based on scientific facts, not political arguments. The opponents are Dr. Anne Marie Adams, a gynecologist, Pat Allen, president of the International Faith-Based Coalition, Assemblymember Jim Patterson, and the Pacific Justice Institute. And the opponents say women already have the right to choose under current California law, so Prop 1 is not needed to protect their health and reproductive rights. And that Prop 1 is an extreme and costly proposal that punishes taxpayers as abortion seekers from outside of California will swamp California resources. So both groups have raised money in relation to their campaigns. The supporters have raised $13.5 million, and the opponents have raised almost $100,000. And I want to mention about the money issue. You can go to different sites online and you can get statements about the money, and they all vary. So Voter's Edge says one thing, Ballotpedia says another thing, Cal Matters might say another thing. It's confusing, but they're all in the ballpark, so they're not too far away from each other. So the question that you're asked to vote on is: shall the California State Constitution be amended to expressly provide the right to reproductive freedom as a fundamental right protected by the state constitution? A yes vote supports amending the state constitution by adding reproductive freedom as an expressly protected right, and a no vote opposes amending the constitution to provide a right for reproductive freedom. So that is, pardon me? We have a question. How do I know what it is? Okay. No, I thought you said, do we have? We do have. All right, let's hear
it. Are you asking me to ask it? Hello?
And we can't hear you. You're muted.
I'm to tell Maren that you can ask the question.
Hi, my question is, does federal law supersede state law if one day Republicans get a supermajority and they pass a federal ban on abortions? What protection would Prop 1 provide to California women?
Well, federal law and the federal constitution, in the federal constitution, has supremacy over state law and state constitutions. However, it is usually held that the states have the right to address issues of health and safety for the people who are in their state. So it would depend on how that federal law would be written and how a court might interpret that law in terms of whether or not it would overrule the California State Constitution. Now, the California State Constitution could be overruled depending on, as I say, how a federal law were written and how a court interpreted it. So it is not totally foolproof, but it does give a measure more of safety for the reproductive rights. Did I use that analogy? In giving this talk, someone gave an analogy and they said, well, so the statutes are like you put on a belt to hold your pants up, but you wear suspenders as a safety measure, and that's the Constitution. And that's true, but it isn't a suit of armor. So, okay, is there another question? Okay, good.
Hello, I'm Katie Watkins, and I'm going to present ballot initiatives 26 and 27. I'll stop in between and let you ask questions if you have any. So, ballot 26 is an initiative. It's an in-person sports betting tribal casinos is the title of it, and it's an initiative constitutional amendment and a statute. So the question asked the voters is, should California increase the allowable gambling activities at American Indian-owned casinos and allow betting on sports events at casinos and horse racing tracks? So just a very short background. As of June 28th, 2022, sports betting was legal. 4 laws have already been passed to legalize the sports betting in 35 states and in DC. So this is an example between us and them. So what does this prop do? It legalizes in-person sports betting, roulette, and dice gaming in private casinos. It legalizes in-person sports betting at 4 horse racing tracks. It allows private lawsuits against illegal gambling in some situations, meaning the private citizen or company can file a lawsuit out of the government. So, it enacts a tax of 10% on profits derived from sports betting at racetracks. The state government will be required to distribute the revenue as follows: 15% to the California Department of Health for researching, developing, and implementing programs for problem gambling prevention and mental health, and providing grants to local governments to address problem gambling and mental health. That's 15%. Another 15% to the Bureau of Gambling Control for enforcing and implementing sports wagering and other forms of gaming within the state, and 70% will go to the general fund. So the fiscal impact of this would be increased state revenues, or could be increased state revenues, possibly reaching tens of millions of dollars on an annual basis. Some of these resources of these revenues would support increased state regulatory and enforcement costs that would reach the low tens of millions of dollars annually. So supporters say Prop 26 would continue the 20-year legacy of allowing closely regulated gambling to support American Indian economies. It is also the most, they say, is the most responsible approach to authorizing sports wagering and would promote American Indian self-reliance. So some of the top 5 contributors here and the amounts that as of right now have been posted. Federated, for supporters of this proposition, of the Federated Indians of Raton Rancheria, they contributed $30,150,000. The Pachanga Band of Louisiana Mission Indians, $25,430,155. The Yocha Dehe Wenton Nations, $20,271,873. The Verona Band of Mission Indians, $10,376,699. And the Agua Caliente Band of Kaluya Indians, 10,251,858. There's a long list of other contributors, but I just picked this top. So there's a total amount of money to date, the end of September, raised in support of this proposition is $111,910,692. So the opponents of Prop 26 say it would massively expand gambling in California for the benefit of large tribal casinos. And it would leave casino workers unprotected from worker safety, wage and labor, harassment, and anti-discrimination laws. So the opponents for this, I also have top 5. Congress Casino, $10,085,001. Hawaiian Gardens Casino, $10,085,000. United Ventures LLC, Lloyd Choi, $4,060,000. Bicycle Casino, $2,085,000, and Bump at BMB and Associates, $2 million. So the total amount of money raised in opposition to 26 is $42,546,117. So, what does a yes vote mean? It means that 4 racetracks could offer in-person sports betting. Racetracks would pay the state a share of sports bets made. Tribal casinos could offer in-person sports betting, roulette, and games played with dice such as craps, if permitted by individual tribal agreements with the state. Tribes would be required to support state sports betting regulatory costs at casinos. People and entities would take a new way to seek enforcement of certain state gambling laws. So a no vote means that sports betting would continue to be illegal in California. Tribal casinos would continue to be unable to offer roulette and games played with dice, and no changes would be made to the way state gambling laws are enforced. Are there any questions about 26? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, Nancy Silver.
Who owns the people, the entities who are in opposition? I can tell you the names of the companies. I did not research to see who owns those. But the ones in opposition are, wait a minute, here we go. Commerce Casino, Hawaiian Gardens. Right, but the ones who are opposed, they're card clubs. Yes.
So what's being said in the audience, because the people on the Zoom can't hear you, is...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you repeat it? That's what
No, I can't repeat every one all day. But basically, they are smaller casinos, some owned by Indians, and they are the ones who are opposed to this proposition. But they are casinos that when you drive down the freeway, you'll see, many times you'll see the signs up for them. Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead, you were first. Okay, what you said is, you can see on the commercials is exactly what the opposition says to this, which is that this is all backed. The opposition says that this is all backed by the large casinos, especially with the provision against lawsuits that they could then bring against smaller casinos and put them out of business. That's the claim they're making. I cannot tell you whether or not that's exactly true, but that is what the claim they are now making. Okay, and who else? Someone else on Zoom? Have a question? Nancy, can you hear us?
Yes,
Can you state your question, please?
yes. My question is, do you know what share of the money they will give to the state?
Yes. It's a 10% on profits derived from sports betting at racetracks.
10%, okay. And has it been
70% of that goes to the general fund. The other goes to two other funds to help take care of people who have gambling addiction.
Okay, I was going to ask you, where is the money supposed to be spent?
Yeah, 15% to the California Department of Health for research about gambling problems, and 15% to the Bureau of Gambling Control for enforcement. And then the 70% goes to the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
That help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, 27, the other gambling bill. Okay, 27 is called online sports betting. It is also an initiative constitutional amendment and a statute vote. So this question is, do you want to allow Indian tribes and affiliated businesses to operate online and or mobile sports wagering outside tribal lands? Direct revenues to regulatory costs, homelessness programs, and non-participating tribes. That's the question. So the background on this is the California Constitution and California statutes define what types of gambling are allowed in the state. Currently, the California lottery, card rooms, betting on horse racing, and gambling in American Indian-owned casinos are allowed. The casinos are allowed to operate slot machines, lottery games, and certain types of card games. The rules governing American Indian-owned casinos are set by compacts that are agreements between the owner tribes and the state. Betting on sports events is not now legal in California. So what this proposition does, it would allow adults 21 or older to bet on adult sports events online. No betting would be allowed for things like high school sports. The bettor need not be in a casino to make a bet. It would allow tribes to offer online sports betting under the tribe's name and branding. Tribes would have to pay a one-time $10 million licensing fee to the state and a renewal fee every 5 years. It would allow gaming companies to offer online services for betting if they strike a deal with one of the tribes to operate in California. And then they would pay a one-time licensing fee to the state of $100 million, plus a renewal fee every 5 years. So this would create a new division within the state's Justice Department to regulate online sports wagering. So it imposed a tax, a 10% tax on all companies or tribes offering sports betting. The tax is imposed on a gross amount minus how much money is paid out to winning tribe bets, promotional bets, and federal gambling taxes. So after paying the state's regulatory costs, revenue from the tax and license fees would go to this new fund that would be created. Of the money in the fund, 85% would be used for homelessness and related mental health programs. 15% of the fund would go to American Indian tribes that are not involved in sports betting. None of the revenue or licensing fees would be included in the state's general fund for purposes of allocating money to programs such as public education. So the fiscal impact of this one would be increased state revenues, possibly in the hundreds of millions of dollars annually, but not to exceed $500 million annually. And some revenues would support state regulatory costs, possibly reaching the mid-tens of millions of dollars annually. So supporters of Prop 27 say, It will provide hundreds of millions of dollars to support programs that alleviate homelessness, mental health, and addiction in California, and will benefit every California tribe, especially rural and economically disadvantaged tribes which don't own big casinos. Now, I'm going to give you the top 5, and they're basically the commercial people from out of state, I believe. Betfair Interactive US LLC DBA FanDuel Sportsbook, his responsible officer, Corey Fox, gave $35,009,850. Crown Gaming Inc., DBA DraftKings, contributed $34,366,085. BetMGM LLC, responsible officer Andrew Hagopian, $25 million, and Penn Interactive Ventures LLC responsible officer John Klapowitz, $25 million. That's the top 5. There's many others, but the total amount. Oh, and the last one was Bally's. So I think we all probably know that name from Las Vegas. Bally's Interactive LLC responsible officer Craig Eaton also gave $12,500. $12,500,000. So the total measures for to support this proposition of money raised is $169,352,031. So opponents say Prop 27 is a deceptive measure promoted by out-of-state companies to legalize online and mobile sports gambling in California, and that online gambling is not a solution to homelessness or other social ills and will open more people to gambling addiction. So the opponents of this people who contributed is the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, $103,279,308. Federated Indians of Groton Rancheria, $30,150,000. Pechanga Band of Lusano Mission Indians, $25,431,055. Yoka Dehe Winton Nation, $20,236,234. And the Verona Band of Mission Indians, $10,379,699. And their total contribution from all of and there were over 100, I believe, contributors to this, to the opposition, is $228,130,530. So a yes vote means that licensed tribes or gambling companies could offer online sports betting over the internet and mobile devices to people 20 years of age or older and on non-tribal lands in California. Those offering online sports betting would be required to pay the state a share of sports bets made. A new state unit would be created to regulate online sports betting, and new ways to reduce illegal online sports betting would be available. So, and no changes would be made to the way state gambling laws are enforced on the no vote. So I will add to this that because the question does come up. So if both Prop 26 and 27 are passed, and legal sports betting in some way, if both pass, it is possible that both will take effect. So if a court finds that parts of the propositions are in conflict, the one that has the most votes will then prevail. So any questions about 27? 27. Allison, go ahead.
Hi, Katie. I just saw an ad, and it said that other states which allow online gambling has had an increase of almost 200% in like Gamblers Anonymous and other programs like that. Do you know if that's true? And also the second question is, it says that it's under 21, but how do they regulate that online? How will they?
Okay, so the first one, I don't know the statistics on that. I hadn't seen that, but it's what was your source?
Oh, I just saw an ad right before I got on this, and
okay.
it was an ad, of course, opposing
Right.
Prop
Okay.
27. Yeah.
I guess that must be a new ad. I haven't seen that one. The second part of the question was
online gambling for under 21-year-olds. How do they regulate that? Of course, if you win, they can easily get an older brother or friend to, say that they were doing it. But, how do they regulate kids that are under 21?
So what you're saying is, how do you regulate anyone under 21 making a sports bet? Your 6-year-old to get on there. I don't know. I was reading something the other day about the technology of determining the age, and it's not, according to what I read, it's not perfect. So that is, yes, sir.
Thank you, Katie.
Hmm?
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Allison. So the question is, who pays for all the data costs for people who are walking down the street gambling on the phone? I would say their provider. The person, if it depends on their plan, if they have unlimited texting, but unlimited data, then it's just part of their bill. That would be my, yes. I'm sorry, say that again. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So what was the source? Say it again. Hartford Healthcare. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'll come back for 30 minutes.
No, it says 2 costs. I'm not sure why that. Okay, I'm doing Proposition 28. This is a fun one. Provides additional funding for arts and music education in public schools. This is an initiative statute that just needs a majority approval. The question, should the state provide specific funding for arts and music education in public schools, an amount higher than the existing constitutional minimum amount required for public education? So the background of this proposition is that it was placed on the ballot through the signature gathering process spearheaded by former LA Unified Superintendent Austin Bootner. There is currently no guaranteed source of annual funding in the state budget specifically for arts and music education in K-12 public schools. So back in 1988, we passed Prop 98, or California passed Prop 98, which changed the California Constitution to require a minimum percentage of the state budget to be spent on K-12 education. This minimum guarantee is the higher of two numbers, either 40% of the general fund or the prior year's minimum guarantee adjusted for student attendance and cost of living. So due to the state's low property taxes, California schools rely more heavily on state funding than the national average. Prop 98 enables school funding to keep pace with economic growth and enrollment, the latter of which is expected to be essentially flat or even decline over the next 5 years. Districts receiving funding for K-12 students based on average daily receive funding for K-12 students is based on average daily attendance, what we call the ADA. State law requires students to provide arts and music instruction to all students in grades 1 through 6. Students in grades 7 through 8 must be offered such courses as an elective. High school students must complete only 1 year of arts or music education, a foreign language or career technical education. Currently, half of California high schools have set their minimum minimum graduation requirements to match the state's public university admission requirements. And under these requirements, high school students must complete this 1 year of visual and performing arts to graduate. The state funds the after-school education and safety program and the expanded learning opportunities program. So that's where some children get their arts and music. These before and after school and summer programs require an enrichment component that may contain the arts and music. So what would Prop 28 do? It would not raise new taxes, but would set aside a portion of the state's general fund equal to 1% of the Prop 98 money to fund arts and music education in the K-12 public schools. This funding would be in addition to the funding already guaranteed by Prop 98. Prop 98 would follow similar rules that Prop 28 would follow similar rules that Prop 98 followed. In other words, the legislature is allowed to reduce funding for arts and music education in a year when total funding for K-12 education is reduced, following a 2/3 vote from both the state Senate and Assembly. Funding for Prop 28 would be distributed based on enrollment numbers in preschool and K-12. 70% of the funding would be allocated to schools based on their proportion of California's total enrollment. The remaining 30% of funding would be allocated to schools based on their proportion of students from low-income households that are enrolled statewide. And each school's principal would be tasked with planning how funding would be spent. Larger schools would be required to spend 80% of the funding to hire arts and music teachers and aides, and 20% on training, supplies, and materials, and for educational partnerships with community and arts organizations. Local governing boards, such as school boards, would be required to certify annually that their schools spent the funding provided by Prop 28 on arts and music education. And local governing boards would also be required to report publicly how funding was used to directly benefit students. So the fiscal impact of Prop 28 would increase state expenditures between $800 million and $1 billion annually. This is above the existing required constitutional expenditures from Prop 98, which linked the minimum guarantee at close to 40% of the state general fund. Prop 28 would also adjust the minimum guarantee by student attendance and changes in the cost of living. So supporters include, they have a website, Vote Yes on 28, and over 10 million has been spent to support this measure, with Austin Bootner being the main contributor. He spent over 4 million. Other supporters include California Teachers Association, Steve Ballmer, he's the former Microsoft executive and owner of the LA Clippers, Fender Musical Instruments, the California State PTA, the Los Angeles Unified School District, California Democratic Party. And the supporters say Prop 28 would increase funding for educational programs without raising taxes for Californians. Arts and music education can improve a student's personal and academic life. They also say there will be enough money for an additional 15,000 full-time and part-time arts and music teachers and aides over the next few years, roughly doubling their current number. And finally, they took the matter to voters because politicians have failed to provide adequate funding. Opponents include none. There are no opponents. No money has been raised. There are no arguments reported by the Secretary of State. You'll find no arguments in your pamphlets that you got from the Secretary of State. But I did want to add something because earlier when the Los Angeles Times was putting out their endorsements, they opposed Prop 28 because they were concerned it constrains lawmakers when the state's revenues decrease. However, then they changed their minds, and this is what they said. Well, but voters must act where state and local leaders have failed. Not only is arts education supported by our overwhelming majority of Americans, it is essential for building children's capacity for creativity and self-expression, critical thinking, empathy, and other skills that help them engage with school and civic society. Studies have also linked it to improved attendance, better scores on standardized tests, and higher college aspirations. We should be clear that this initiative is a backdoor way to funnel more state money into schools, and that its approach is more pragmatic than perfect, but that is not a reason enough to vote no and deprive California children of these opportunities. So a yes vote on this measure means California would provide specific funding for arts and music education in public schools, and a no vote means they will not provide this specific funding for arts and music education in the public schools. Any questions? So the question is, back in the day when we first were doing, when California first authorized the gambling, the casinos, they said all this money was going to be raised to go for, the lottery was to go for the, well, both the casinos and the lottery was supposed, all this money was supposed to go into the schools. And where is that money? Where did that money go? Do you have an answer for that?
That's a very, very old indicator. It was never proposed that the law would have more than 4%. It never produced. And the general fund for education was literally $2,500 money.
Oh,
that game was
okay. So let me just, this was a great answer by one of our audience members who's an educator. And so what she said is, so they were only going to, from the lottery, going to have 4% that goes, maximum that goes to the schools. However, whatever came from the lottery would then be taken away from the regular fund contribution that goes to the school. So with a net zero increase in funds to the school.
That's what happened after we voted for it. We didn't know that.
Yeah, we didn't know that until after the vote.
And so that worries me very about the music. I just feel panic.
The music one is different in that it is, it's over and above, and it is written in the proposition. Well, there's nothing about help from the homeless in the music. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. Yes. Oh yeah, 1%. I'm sorry, 1% of the 40%. Of the 40%. No. No, actually it's 1%. No, it's 1% equal to the 40%. In other words, if it was, it is an increase of funds that come, increase of money that comes from the general fund. But that 1% is 1% of the, what, Prop 98. The amount of it. But it's extra. It doesn't, so it's extra. The 1% is the 1% that Prop 98 says, and that's in addition to Prop 98. Yeah. Well, so Connie, so just so people online can hear, so Connie is saying the reason why there hasn't been opposition because no one knows who would be hurt by this. Okay. All right, so we had a question over here. Okay. Was it a, go ahead. I was going to acknowledge you. So we have a music educator in our audience, And you're a music educator for 1 through 6, right?
I've been.
Yeah. Maybe you could come up here and say, because I'm not going to be able to repeat.
Thanks. I'm Deborah Schrader, and I've been a music educator for the last 26 years. Started off in Palos Verdes, then went to Long Beach, and then came back to Palos Verdes. I'm recently retired from PUSD as a music teacher for elementary. And the problem that I see is that since Proposition 13 passed, what was it, 1980s? 78. Oh my gosh, it was a long time ago. Music and arts got cut from the school budgets because they were considered something extra that people could pick up with foundations, which is what Palos Verdes did. The Peninsula Education Foundation has sponsored all of our music programs for elementary for many, many years. The problem is that we need something that is statewide that could allocate funds specifically for arts and music. They are part of the standards that all children are expected to be able to receive. But the reality is that the allocation from each individual school district in California is completely different. If you go to Long Beach, every single kid has an equal access to music, starting from very young. If you go to Los Alamitos, they don't do it until 3rd or 4th grade. If you go to Torrance, they cut out all of their music, all of it. And yes, busing, it has to do with lots of things that were considered extra. And they considered that people who can afford it will pay for it for their children, and they'll get something. But I know as a music teacher that if every child has an equal access, they build their skills. And we are not going to have orchestras and bands that can play good quality music unless it starts really young. And so I am strongly in favor of Proposition 28, but I'm not here to do that. But I just wanted to inform you, I wanted to inform you that it's been very unequal. And now is the time when we have a chance.
Thank you. I've known Deborah for a long time, and she's been a champion of music for a long time. Okay, any other questions for Prop 28? Okay, so we're going to go on to Prop 29. So this is the kidney dialysis clinics requirement. It's an initiative statute. I know you all are really looking forward to this one. The question is, should outpatient dialysis clinics be required to have a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site at all hours when patients are being treated? And should they be required to provide various clinic-related information to patients in the state? So the background is patients with end-stage renal disease have kidneys that do not function well enough for the patient to survive without either a kidney transplant or ongoing dialysis. Dialysis is used to replicate kidney function and generally takes 4 hours per treatment, 3 days per week. High blood pressure and diabetes are the main causes of chronic kidney disease in the United States, and the lives of patients on dialysis can be extended for years. If this proposal and proposition seems familiar, it's because it's virtually the same as the two previous measures. Proposition 8 in November 2018 and Proposition 23 in November 2020 also dealt with dialysis clinics. All three propositions have several stipulations in common, such as that clinics may not discriminate against patients based on the source of payment. The big difference in Prop 29 is the new requirement for reporting ownership interest in each clinic and the required use of telehealth when on-site staffing isn't available. Props 8 and 23, like this current one, had the support of the Service Employees International Union, United Healthcare Workers West, so it's SEIU for short, a labor union for healthcare workers. They all reflect a conflict between the union and the state's two largest dialysis businesses, DaVita and Francesnias Medical Care. The union said workers at dialysis clinics have been attempting to unionize since 2016, but that their employers were retaliating against pro-union employees. Prop 8 back in 2018 was defeated by a vote of 60% to 40%. And Prop 23 back in 2020 was defeated by a vote of 63% to 37%. So about 80,000 patients in California receive dialysis services from 650 chronic dialysis clinics. And these clinics are licensed by the California Department of Public Health using federal standards. To serve more patients, these clinics often operate 6 days a week for extended hours. They are required to report infections to the federal government, and they prohibit dialysis centers from discriminating due to payer source. These clinics are already required to have a physician on staff overseeing patient care, and each patient has a kidney specialist directing their individual treatment. An on-site doctor would not have the authority to make changes to the care prescribed by the patient's doctor. Most patients on dialysis are covered by Medicare and or Medi-Cal, which pay a fixed rate for CDC services. About 10% of CDC patients are covered by group and individual health insurance plans. These plans often pay multiple times the amount for dialysis treatment than the amounts paid by government programs because their rates are negotiated with each insurance company. After a period of time, all dialysis patients are covered by Medicare. No other state requires a doctor on site, nor do the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services or the California State Department of Public Health, which regulates dialysis centers. So Prop 29 would require a licensed physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant in each case with at least 6 months of experience in kidney care to be on site at all times when dialysis is being performed. Telehealth may be used for up to 1 year if no such person is available on site. This prop would also report to patients the name of any physician with more than 5% interest in the clinic. They would not discriminate among patients based on the source of payment. They would report information about dialysis-related infections among their patients, and they would obtain permission from the state to close or reduce hours. So in terms of the fiscal impact, there are fiscal implications for both the clinics and state and local government if this passes. And that's because the clinics would probably have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more annually for staff salaries. State and local governments might have to pay tens of millions of dollars more annually if clinics close and patients must go to a more expensive facility such as an emergency room, or if the clinics negotiate higher reimbursement rates. So the supporters include the SEIU, the union, the United Healthcare Workers West. They've given about 7.7 million. And then others have given about 8 million. And also the Democratic Party has supported this. There's a Yes on 29 website, but it's not functional. The total money raised is 16 million. So these supporters say pretty much what I've just said: required a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant to be present during a dangerous procedure like dialysis is common sense and a matter of patient safety. They also say these clinics may use telemedicine for up to a year if the required healthcare workers are not available. And they say that the big corporations operating dialysis clinics can easily make the required staffing changes and still profit hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So the opponents have raised 86 million. Their main contributors are the three dialysis clinics. DaVita, which put in 42 million. Francesmia's Medical Care, they put in another 27 million. And then the third is the U.S. Renal Care. They put in 6 million. And so they have a the no Prop 29 website where you can see all their endorsements. The opponents are saying dialysis is administered by specifically trained technicians, and every dialysis patient is under the care of their own kidney doctor, so administrative oversight is unnecessary. They say Prop 29 would worsen our healthcare worker shortage, taking thousands of these individuals from hospitals where they're needed and placing them in administrative jobs. And the unnecessary requirement for on-site administrators who do not provide patient care would cost hundreds of millions every year, forcing clinics to reduce hours or close. A yes vote on this measure means that the chronic dialysis clinics would be required to have physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site during all patient treatment hours. And a no vote on this measure means that they would not. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay, Nancy?
Yeah. So I find it interesting that no other state requires this, nor does Medicaid or Medicare. So I guess I'm confused why we're pushing so hard for this.
It's SEIU is pushing for this. This is part of their negotiation with the clinics. One of the additional things is they feel like some of these clinics have doctors that are benefiting, a lot, so they're wanting to know how much money they're getting from the clinic. Again, this is the third time it's been put up. It's only, the wording is only different.
Yeah. I guess I'm just curious, no other state no other states pushing for this.
Not only that, but in other times when I presented this, I could not find a study that said where the other states don't have this requirement that there's any added infection or a patient has been harmed by this. So it's not like they're putting out statistics to say that people are being harmed.
Right. It sounds like it has more to do with the union supporting it.
It has to do with their negotiations with these clinics.
Okay. Okay.
And I will say that in the other thing that's interesting to note, in the other two times that this proposition has been on the ballot, that difference in who raised what money, they're putting in, let's say 10 to 16, 20 million, and the opponents, in other words, the clinics, are putting in 80 to 100 million.
Okay, thank you.
No, I don't want to move it because this is the money. Yeah. I don't want to move the money. Okay.
I got a question. Okay.
Who are we asking? Who's saying it?
I got a question.
Al. Okay, go ahead, Al.
Most of the ads talk about the clinics shutting down if this thing were to go through. I noticed in reading the proposition that there's some language in there that if this passes, the clinics don't get to shut down without state approval.
That's correct.
So there is a control. So their biggest ad thing, I don't think is valid. There is some control that comes with this thing that says, they just say, well, okay, I'm just going to shut down. There will be some control over it.
That's correct. A clinic cannot shut down without state approval.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from the So the question is, if they require a physician or physician assistant or nurse practitioner, would it be hard for them to get that person and, and thus continue operation? I mean, that's what the opponents are saying, that these people are needed in their other, where else they're working, and that they would only have an administrative job because the patient who goes to the dialysis, they all have a doctor, not at the clinic, but that asks them to go to that clinic. And anything that changes on terms of their treatment has to go through their own doctor. It cannot be, nothing can be done by the person on site. They can only then call the doctor. So that's why they're claiming it's more administrative. Yeah, but that in other words, the doctor that they want to have at the clinic really doesn't have any power to change what's happening to that patient. Okay, we have another question. So that's what I was saying, that if okay, so the question is, if this proposition, I always tell you. Okay, so Judy's asking, if this proposition was to pass, who would bear the cost in response to it? And that's what I was saying, that the clinics would either raise their costs, and that's why they're saying they might go out of business, or they would negotiate with your insurers, and the insurers would have to pay more, and that would raise your cost as a patient, or someone who has insurance. So, and Medicare, they don't negotiate, so they have a set rate, so it raises the ones who are not under Medicare. Well, it's a minority. Yeah. So, I mean, in the fiscal impact, which is done by an independent source, they're the ones that are stating that clinics could close and patients may go to more expensive facilities such as or that they would negotiate higher reimbursement, but not with Medicare. Okay. All right. So we're going to go on to 30.
Okay, Prop 30. It's on the website. It says it's called the Income Tax on Millionaires for Electric Cars. And this is an initiative statute, and it's not a constitutional amendment. So here's the question. Should the tax rate on personal income above $2 million annually be increased by 1.75%, and the revenue dedicated to zero emission vehicles, which is now shortened ZEV, subsidies? ZEV vehicle is for infrastructure such as electric vehicle charging stations and also wildfire suppression and prevention programs. So the background on this is California has a graduated income tax, as we all know, the rates ranging from 1 to 13.3%. Last year, California raised more than $130 billion in revenue from personal income tax. California currently has a budget surplus of $97 billion. California has taken steps to respond to climate change. State law requires California to reduce its overall greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020 and 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. Gas-powered vehicles and wildfire smoke are the two largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. So state law currently requires about 8% of new cars sold in the state to be zero emission by 2025, and also requires rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft to achieve a level of zero greenhouse gas emissions to ensure 90% of their vehicle miles are fully electrical by 2030. The California Air Resources Board has adopted regulations to end the sale of gas-powered cars in California by 2035. As of this year, about 16% of all new car sales in California are zero emission, twice the share in 2020. The state has targeted $10 billion over a 5-year period for ZEV programs. The state agencies are responsible for wildfire suppression and prevention on about 1/3 of state lands. Federal and local agencies are responsible for the rest. The state budgeted for wildfires this year is approximately $4 billion. So what this measure does is it would increase the income tax by an additional 1.75% on income above $2 million a year for individuals. That brings it up to 15.05%. The additional tax would take effect on January 1, 2023. The initiative provides a sunset. The tax increase would end on January 1, 2043, or earlier if there are 3 consecutive calendar years in which statewide greenhouse gas emissions are 80% below the 1991. So revenue from the increased income tax will be placed in a Clean Cars and Clean Air Trust Fund. It would then be allocated as follows: 45% for rebates and other incentives for zero-emission vehicle purchases, 35% for charging stations for zero-emission vehicles, and 20% for wildlife prevention and suppression programs. The Prop 30 stipulates that at least half of the funds allocated for ZEVs and ZEV charging must primarily benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. It also requires that CAL FIRE make hiring and training additional firefighters a top priority for its funds. So they say this fiscal impact is going to be this measure would generate 3.5 to 5 billion in revenue most years, providing 2.8 to 4 billion annually in ZEV funding and 700 million to 1 billion annually in wildfire response. The state has set new targets for conversion to ZEV, called the ZEV mandate. Therefore, additional funding from the proposition to help buy new ZEVs would not have much effect on the total number of ZEVs driven in California. This is because the ZEV mandate would already require a significant increase in the number of ZEV sales, even without the additional spending. Instead, the proposition's main effect would be shift who pays for the ZEVs. That is, more costs would be covered by revenue from the new tax on high-income taxpayers instead of by vehicle sellers and or buyers. This would not have much effect on state and local finances. It could also decrease state and local costs for wildfire suppression and prevention, but the amount is not known. So the largest, by far, contributor to the supporters for this is Lyft at 45,370,885 today. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers has contributed about $1 million. And then CAL FIRE, state firefighters, and Coalition for Clean Air are also supporters. There's a number of supporters on this and opponents. So the total support money raised to date is $47,804,131. Again, Lyft has contributed $45 million. Okay. Supporters say existing programs are insufficient to address California's poor air quality, which is largely caused by automobile exhaust and wildfire smoke. Prop 30 would make electric vehicles more affordable and would create well-paying green jobs. Prop 30 would fund critically needed programs to relate to catastrophic wildfires and protect homes. And the funding will come solely from the 1% of Californians most able to afford it, and restore clean air to low and middle income families that most need it. So opposed to this are California State Teachers Association, Governor Newsom, California Small Business Association, Republican Party of California, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, United Latinos for Action. And they've contributed a total amount, they and others have contributed a total amount of $19,796,897. So these opponents who say that California is already spending more than $50 billion for multi-year climate investing, including $10 billion for ZEVs. There is no guarantee that Prop 30 will make ZEVs affordable for most California families. We already have some of the highest taxes in the country. A lot of the air pollution in Southern California could be eliminated by state agencies, could be eliminated by spending transportation dollars on freeway improvements to reduce traffic jams.
Oh, give me a break. Oh, I'm sorry.
Pardon?
I'm sorry.
Okay, there's another there's a Mercury News editorial board had an article also in opposition where they said they should reject it because California provided little independent policy analysis on which to base a multi-billion-dollar decision. It's going to go, it's 20 years and it's going to go into a special fund, and that's the only way the money can be used. So that was their objection. And in this case, it lifts the ride-hailing company that has thus far poured $15 million into the initiative campaign in hopes that wealthy taxpayers will subsidize the firm's transition to electric vehicles. So yes vote supports increasing the tax on personal income above $2 million by 1.75%. And dedicating the revenue to zero-emission vehicle subsidies, zero-emission vehicle infrastructure such as electric vehicle charging stations, and wildfire suppression and prevention programs. A no vote opposes increasing the tax on personal income above $2 million by 1.75, et cetera, to not have any of this thing happen. So questions? Yes. Oh yeah, what is the rate they're now paying? 13.3. So we'll bring it up 1.7, 1.5 more. So yes, the question on Zoom. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I got people coming at me from different directions. Okay, whoever on Zoom has questions?
Hi, this is Maron again. I have two-part question. First of all, in terms of people who are opposed to 30, that includes Newsom, who's been progressive on climate issues, but you also have California Teachers Association and Federation of Teachers that are against Prop 30. And the second part of my question is, I only hear about Lyft being a sponsor of this proposition. Why are other ride-sharing companies like Uber not behind it?
Well, to the second part with who contributed, so you only hear about Lyft. I think it's because for the Lyft is the total amount of her support is $47,804,000. The Lyft has contributed 45 billion of that. I'm sorry, 45 million of that. So they've contributed, what would you say, 90, I might get the math in my head, but it's like 95%. I don't know, I didn't ask Uber. And they're not, whatever, if they did, they didn't come on the contribution rate. I did not see them. But it could be another. Newsom says, I will only say what Newsom's advertisements have been, but I can repeat, I can't read his mind. So Newsom says that it's a boondoggle for Lyft, basically. That we will then be, taxpayers will then be paying Lyft to upgrade to, that's what he says. So any other questions? I really don't know why teachers are against it. That's all question here. Instead, and so it doesn't show up in the contribution list. Is that what you're saying? And what is your source of that? Okay, so NPR has stated that the billionaires in California are using their. Okay, so if they're using their stock profits to fund. Okay, so that's how it. So by using that method of donating their stock profits, then they don't show up as contributors to the office. What for them? But then they also don't show up then as contributors. Is that correct? What you said? Right along. Right. They should. Okay. Is this new? Because I've never heard of someone doing this. Is this brand new? Okay. So. Okay. So companies are using a way around taxes to get tax write-offs to support or oppose. Okay. And across the board, whatever companies are doing. Right, but I mean, they could that process could be used for or against. That's all it is. Okay. Good. Okay, I think we're kind of getting off topic here. Yeah. Okay. Can we take this? Just excuse me, ma'am. Can we take this discussion offline? Okay. Any other specific questions today? Okay. Thanks. Okay. I'm going to speak on Proposition 31. Flavored Tobacco Products Ban Referendum, which is an initiative referendum. So this is a vote to support or repeal a current piece of legislation relating to flavored tobacco products. Proposition 31 asks voters if they want Senate Bill 793 to go into effect or not. 793 was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor in 2020. However, enforcement is pending the outcome of this election. 793 bans the sale in stores and vending machines of flavored tobacco products and tobacco product flavor enhancers, including vape products, with the exception of hookah tobacco, loose leaf tobacco, and premium cigars. Retailers would be fined $250 for each violation of the law. And this law does not impact online purchases. The federal government regulates tobacco product industry, and the FDA has banned flavored cigarettes except for menthol. The FDA reviews all electronic nicotine delivery systems prior to allowing them to go on the market, but they are not banned. State and local governments may enact stricter rules if they wish. Following the passage of 793 in 2020, a petition to demand a referendum on this law qualified for the ballot
thereby keeping the law from going into effect until the voters decide to either approve of the measure or not. So the legislative analyst said this measure would decrease state tobacco tax revenues by tens of millions of dollars annually to about $100 million. Last year, tobacco taxes raised $2 billion, which was used on healthcare programs. So there would be a drop in that money coming in from tobacco sales, according to the legislative analyst. So the question is, should SB 793 be upheld, thereby banning the sale of flavored tobacco products? Supporters are the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society Action Network, the American Academy of Pediatrics in California. They say that Proposition 31 will help decrease smoking rates, and that Prop 31 protects our youth by ending the sale of candy-flavored tobacco products that lures them into a lifelong addiction to nicotine. The opponents of Prop 31 are the Central Valley Business Federation, the Cal-Asian Chamber of Commerce, the California Coalition for Fairness. They say that Prop 31 will drive more tobacco sales into the illegal market that already exists, and that Prop 31 goes too far in banning some products that the FDA already allows, such as the menthol cigarettes and the vaping products, will cause people to buy other tobacco products that are more harmful. Supporters have raised about $28.5 million. The largest contributor is Michael Bloomberg. Opponents have raised $2.1 million, and those contributions are mostly from large tobacco companies like Raleigh and some others. So a yes vote upholds the contested legislation, Senate Bill 793, which would ban the sale of flavored tobacco products. A no vote repeals the legislation, thus keeping the sale of flavored tobacco products legal in California. Any questions on this one? Yes. Same one. Yes. No, to enact the ban and have that piece of legislation passed, you have to vote yes. So yes passes, yes says the law that was passed in 2020 banning flavored tobaccos will go into effect. And no means it will not go into effect and the law will be stricken from the books. Sorry. In this proposition, it does. That's correct. And that the FDA, when they stopped flavored tobacco, banned flavored tobacco, they did not ban menthol. Oh, no. Well, the FDA has not stopped vaping, so that's still available. But as I said, states can pass stricter regulations than that federal law. So this is 793 was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor as a stricter provision for the state of California than federal law allows. So it includes all flavors, including menthol, in the ban, and it includes vaping products as well in the ban. Yes. I'm terribly sorry, but I'm not hearing well enough to be able to hear you. Do you want to come up and ask that question? Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to know if the measure would reduce, let me back up. Before, when we had tobacco industry selling a lot of cigarettes, there was a health issue that came about. And through different cases, the tobacco industry had to pay different states to help take care of the people that were harmed by it. If we vote to support vaping and other tobacco products, will that release them from being later responsible, the companies from being later responsible for the health issues that come out of this? Because we voted to approve it.
If you vote to approve it, you are banning the sale of the flavored tobaccos. If you vote, if this were voted down and the law were repealed, it would only leave the situation the same way it is right now. So it wouldn't change what we are now experiencing and what responsibilities exist at the moment. I don't know if I think that answers your question. But the whole thing is,
this is what Carol was saying. This was passed 2 years ago by I said that, I know, but I didn't know. This is so tricky. We are trying to get the young people to reduce the vaping, right? To have a choice. Now they can still buy it online, just like Nancy was saying. But this was passed 2 years ago, and as soon as it was passed, the tobacco companies, which are the main opponents of this, made it got the signatures to put it on the ballot. So by being on the ballot is to say you want to vote for that legislation. So you want to have a yes vote. That's the tricky part that Carol was bringing up, is that when you're telling something about that, and you're against young people having to date more with flavored tobacco, in order to say that, you have to vote yes for this. And in terms of your question, by voting no, it just keeps things the same way. But I mean, this is going to come up again. There's some other legislation that's happening now that our legislators have voted on, that now the proponents are doing a referendum, and it stalls that legislation for several years.
And the way you vote yes or no on a referendum is all in the way the question is asked. Because you could ask it either direction to make it be a yes or a no. And in this case, it's a yes. Pardon me? They always try and make them confusing.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Nancy Silver.
Go ahead.
My question is, this banning of flavors, is it for only people under 18 or under 21, or is it for everybody?
It's for anyone who buys a pack of cigarettes. In fact, it isn't for the people who buy it. It's that they cannot be sold any longer.
Okay, because it kind of sounds a little bit like prohibition. Which
yes, it is. Exactly.
Yes. So, I mean, it seems like people are just going to buy it online. So I don't quite know.
Well, the people who want this repealed, actually, they have compared this to prohibition and said that didn't work and this won't either.
I mean, people can still purchase it, right, online?
Online, they can, yes.
Mm-hmm. Which is how everybody
not in stores, not in stores or vending machines, if this were to pass.
Yeah. And I think there are some exceptions to what's prohibited too, right?
There are what?
I think that there are some they don't prohibit everything. Certain flavors they prohibit, but everything.
No, all flavors. All flavors, including menthol.
Oh, okay. Interesting. But it's also for adults. Yes, yeah.
And it's for adults. In fact,
yeah. I mean, I think adults can make up their own minds.
it is for people who are. I mean, right now, tobacco products can be sold to people who are of age to buy tobacco products, but under this law, those flavored tobacco products could not be sold to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem with that because I think adults should be able to make up their own minds. So even though I know we all pay extra for our health insurance because people have all these terrible vices, but this is not going to cure that. So anyway, okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Connie said the tobacco companies wouldn't be spending so much money if they didn't feel this was going to impact their sales.
That's interesting. But I mean, I was just reading, they said something about in San Francisco, they tried to ban flavors because they thought, okay, kids won't, maybe they'll stop vaping, but they just said the use of cigarettes went up. So
okay, well, we do have two more, so we have to move on. Okay.
Anyway, just interesting.
Okay. The two last measures are the county measures, and I'm going to speak to County Measure A, which was placed on this is an amendment to the county charter that is placed by the Board of Supervisors with a 4/5 vote. The question: should the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, by a 4/5 vote, be authorized to remove a sheriff from office for cause after written notice and an opportunity to be heard? The LA County Sheriff leads one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the U.S. In 2016, the Board of Supervisors implemented a Sheriff Civilian Oversight Commission, whose charter it was, or is still, to improve public transparency and accountability with respect to the Sheriff's Department. There has been resistance to the Commission's oversight by current and previous sheriffs. California Constitution allows county charters to provide for the terms and removal of any elected or appointed county official. So Measure A would amend the charter of the County of Los Angeles to allow the Board of Supervisors to remove a sheriff from office with cause. For the purpose of this measure, cause is violation of a law related to the sheriff's duties, flagrant or repeated neglect of the sheriff's duties, misappropriation of funds or property, willful falsification of a relevant official statement or document, or obstruction of an investigation into the conduct of the sheriff or the sheriff's department. The action would require a 4/5 vote by the board, and the sheriff would be given written notice and an opportunity to be heard. There would be no fiscal impact of this because, it says they would be negligible. Supporters. One supporter group is Yes on Measure A for Sheriff Accountability, which is a coalition of civil and human rights organizations, including the ACLU, and they have raised $140,000. And also a project called the Fairness Project, which includes SEIU and the United Health Workers West that have raised $108,000. Supporters say that the sheriff wields an exceptional amount of power as opposed to some other elected county officials, such as the county assessor. Voters, and also that voters should decide whether this is the right way to enhance accountability of the sheriff. Opponents are County Resident Fighting to Protect Voter Rights, and that is an organization run by Sheriff Villanueva, and he has raised $12,000. Opponents say the board is attempting to create a fast-track pathway to remove a duly elected sheriff, overlooking the recall process, which is already in place. And also, this ignores the right of the people to vote for elected officials. So a yes vote on this means that the county charter will be amended to authorize the county board of supervisors to remove an elected sheriff for cause on a 4/5 vote of the board of supervisors. And a no vote means that the charter will remain as it stands and the supervisors will not be authorized to remove an elected sheriff from office. Judy? No. Oh. There has to be a new election. That's correct. We can't appoint.
Let me repeat for that question. The question is, what would happen once he was removed? And so for the answer was they would have to have a new election. Okay, I'm going to do County Measure C. C for cannabis. It's a cannabis tax for unincorporated areas. And this was placed on the ballot by the LA County Board of Supervisors. And the question is, shall the county enact a tax in the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County on cannabis businesses? So back in August this year, the LA Board of Supervisors, Janice Hahn, Hilda Solis, Holly Mitchell, and Sheila Kuehl, in a 4-1 vote with only Catherine Barger, District 5, voting no, placed this cannabis tax measure on the November 8th election ballot. This measure would allow the county to tax cannabis businesses in the unincorporated areas of LA County. And revenues produced by this general tax will be directed to the county's general fund and through the budget process may be utilized on a broad array of programs and initiatives to further support economic and workforce development in the county, such as the Cannabis Equity Program through the Los Angeles County Office of Cannabis Management, OCM. Before I go on, I just want to, one of the things that confused me on this measure, there is not a lot written about it, and I don't think you have it even in your paper, but this allows them to tax in the unincorporated. They still have to license for cannabis businesses. So you're taxing something that hasn't been licensed yet. Just want to make that clear. In February 2022, this Office of Cannabis Management group within the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs was directed by the board to start the development and implementation of an equitable commercial cannabis licensing program in the unincorporated areas. So we haven't done it yet. This program will help address the administrative barriers that create inequitable outcomes and calls for investments to bridge the gaps in educational, technical, and financial resources caused by systemic racism and exacerbated by the war on drugs. So Measure C would tax at the following rates starting July of 2023 for retail, 4% of gross receipts, for manufacturing, 3% of gross receipts, distribution, 3% of gross receipts, and testing, 1% of gross receipts. And then if you're doing cultivation, $7 per square foot if it's in indoor artificial lighting, $4 per square foot if it's mixed lighting, $4 per square foot for outdoor lighting, and $2 per square foot in any nursery. So they get very detailed on how the tax would happen. But 4% of the gross receipts from any of the people doing cannabis business. But they also have in July of 2026, 3 years later, that they can recognize the need to decrease or increase the tax rate up to the following maximum tax rates on cannabis businesses in the unincorporated areas. And beginning the next year in 2027, the maximum annual tax rate for cultivation will be adjusted for inflation. The ordinance also establishes processes for registration, collection, enforcement, and tax appeal. Payment of the tax does not authorize illegal or unlawful cannabis business activities, nor does it entitle a person to engage in illegal or unlawful cannabis business activities in violation of any local or state law. The proliferation of illegal cannabis businesses throughout the county and the state threatens the sustainability of the legal market and the public health and safety of our communities. And they feel that the supervisors feel that imposing a cannabis tax on illegal cannabis businesses would allow regulators to prosecute on tax evasion, providing an additional tool to combat these illegal businesses. So the fiscal impact is that Measure C is expected to generate approximately 10.3 million to 15.2 million annually until ended by the voters. And if approved, revenue derived from the tax will be deposited into the county's general fund and may be used for any county governmental purpose. This measure requires a majority vote of the voters. So there's not a list of what they say or a list of what the opponents say that I could find, other than what I just said, what the supervisor was saying. And obviously they're the supporters of it. But I haven't seen anything of what the opponent said. A yes vote means you support enacting taxes on cannabis businesses in the unincorporated areas based on everything I just said in terms of, $10 per square foot, so forth. And a no vote means you oppose enacting taxes on cannabis businesses in unincorporated areas. So I also wanted to add, in today's paper, LA Times, they had a yes on Measure C column in terms of their endorsement. And what was interesting about that is because they've done a series in terms of what was happening with the illegal weed and broken promises series that they called it. And they had an example in Boyle Heights, which is within the city of LA, where retail sales are legal and license prices are higher to cover taxes and license fees. And their sales are undercut by illegitimate storefronts selling cheap weed next door in the unincorporated LA. So that's what the supervisors, that's why they put this on. And they have other items in their column in the LA Times that you guys might want to read about, and what we'll probably put a link in our newsletter on. But I guess that the main thing that was, when I first saw this and I saw the tax, is that in order to tax something, you have to have a licensed business. They haven't licensed the businesses yet, and they've set up a organization to do the licensing that they have to do. Yeah. It's a precursor, exactly. It's just a precursor. That's right. But right now they can't tax, so they want to make sure if once they license it that they can tax. Any questions? Go ahead. Ellie, that's right. That's right. The cities are already taxing. That's right. But not the unincorporated. Oh. Yeah. So that's right. That's exactly right. So in terms of the cities right now, it's up to each city and county to decide whether sellers can set up a shop within its boundaries. And in LA County, for example, the cities that have done it is Long Beach, Lancaster, Pasadena, among those that allow retail marijuana sales. Santa Clarita, Glendale, South Pasadena, and Palmdale are among those that don't. And there's still, in this election coming up, you have cities that have that on their ballot, whether they're going to allow cannabis sales in their city. Go ahead. On the ballot because the cannabis company That's right. That's right. It can go on your ballot. So what Connie is bringing up, it can go on the ballot that the city puts it on the ballot, or the people in the city petition to put it on the ballot. So in some of the beach cities, it's been petitioned by the people who cannabis businesses in that city who want it on it, or for cannabis. Go ahead.
There was one question after the candidates, the time for that, but I wanted to mention that we will have a site on our website.
I was going to say, no, that's good. So what Carol's bringing up, because we're at 4:30, and we really didn't expect to go this long on the propositions, but you guys have been asking some great questions, and it's a great discussion. So a lot of people have been contacting us through the website. What are the endorsements? So we had put in our last newsletter, we had listed what the LACDP and the Los Angeles County Democratic Party and the California Democratic endorsements for, but we'll have that. But now that we've seen our ballots, and there's a lot of things on our ballots, we'll have some of those, we'll have those endorsements for you to easily access to be helping you vote. Yes, yeah. So right now, what we will have is there are endorsements for I think there's 6 Superior Court judge seats, but what is not there is that dozen of judges that is just a yes, no, do you keep them on or do you keep them off? But I think what she's bringing up was what I brought up earlier, is I didn't realize 2 pages of my ballot would have these dozen of these presiding judges and associate judges who just need a yes, no. The only thing that I thought we would add on our website is it would be interesting. So what I looked up for each one of them is who appointed them. You know, a lot of them were appointed by Brown, a couple by Schwarzenegger, some by Gray, and some have been around a long time. And a number of them, I think almost all the ones, all the ones that are on the ballot have been confirmed at once, in previous votes. And to me, I don't know, this was the first time I have seen such a list. Is that right? So I don't know how it got on the ballot. Oh, why are we even asking? Is it every 10 years? Well, then I have a 10-year memory here, because I did not remember seeing this many judges for a yes, up or down vote. I think one of the judges has yes, they do. Yeah, but not all. Yeah. 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 So before we adjourn, if you're interested, the California Democratic Party on the proposition, the statewide propositions, is recommending a yes vote on all except for 26. They took no position, and they took a opposed position for 27, and all the others were recommended. For what it's worth. Okay, I think we can adjourn then. Thank you all for coming. By the way, we are the only club that's meeting in person. The only one. I don't know. I think it adds something. We get a dialogue going as we did today. When you're in person, it's really hard to do that on the Zoom. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. I think you want to take a picture.